Hello, good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar. I'm waiting for our panelists to pop in after this interesting intro. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I'll just wait for everyone. Thank you again. So, as you know, the webinar will be recorded, and I will be the moderator. And we will have the chance to hear the talks of our panelists, and then we will have a moment for discussion. So here we are. Hi. So my name is Giulia Martini, and I will be moderating this webinar, Unlocking History in a World of Misinformation, which is organized by the Photographic and Audiovisual Working Group, which is an expert group, as you could see in our presentation, that is part of the International Council on Archives. We deal with different aspects of the management of photographic and audiovisual collections. And this is, our aims are related to the establishment of best practice in the field, but also we also aim to raise awareness on the responsibilities that come with the management of this collection. And this is why the topic of today is somehow more broader and is related to something that we all experience, archivists and non-archivists, every day in our life. And so the idea is also to see how our profession can be impactful through education, but also through our work as archivists, because we will have the chance to discuss. I believe that the establishment of proper practices and metadata are important anyway for our credibility and for the creation of a strong base for fact-checking and for the importance that primary sources have in the debate that we are having today. So today we will discuss how archives, and especially audiovisual archive, can help reduce the spread of misinformation, which is actually inaccurate information that circulates due to error or negligence sometimes, but also disinformation, which is instead refers to false or misleading content that is deliberately shared to deceive the audience. And so today's topic connects with problems and experience that we all had, regardless of our generation or country or professional background. Because we all have encountered, I don't know, historical photographs reposted without provenance, old footage that were recycled as breaking news, or memes that reuse archival footage or image with punchline that are like changing actually their meaning, up to like deep fake style video or or audio. And misinformation and disinformations are dangerous, not just because they convey incorrect facts, but also because when fake and manipulated content is everywhere, when it's so hard to understand what's true and what's not true, then our the trust in the power of information is weakened. And archives do have actual significant potential to counter this dynamic, both by strengthening media literacy and helping people learn how to read images and video and sound clearly, which is kind of what we are going to talk mostly today. But as I was mentioning, also by providing reliable content through metadata, provenance, historical references that allow content to be verified. And this is why education is kind of the central point, and this is why our discussion takes place today in connection with the celebration of the International Day of Education, which is celebrated every 24th of January. Today, our panelists will share practical examples of educational projects that use audiovisual and photographic sources to reach different audiences, whether through school programs, curated storytelling for digital platforms, or toolkit and frameworks that support teachers and cultural institutions. So each speaker will have about 8 minutes to present his project, and then we will move into a moderated discussion, which will be around 40 minutes, and then we will be opening the floor to questions from the audiences. You have Q&A, we have a space for Q&A questions. So I will just go on and introduce quickly all our speakers, and we'll say something very little about their presentation. So our first speaker is Natālija Lāce, and she is archive expert at the Latvian State Archive of Audiovisual Documents. And she is actually the chair of the ICA and Photographic Audiovisual Working Group since 2025. And in addition to her archival work, she also has experience in the cultural and education sectors, and she has further developed her professional expertise in the field of digital and AI-driven solutions. She will present an educational program that brings audiovisual archival documents directly into a classroom, supporting students in assessing authenticity, identify propaganda, and recognizing manipulative alteration. After this, we will hear from Julie and Nealega. She is the head of Probe Archives and the member of the board of the Society of Filipino Archivists for Film. She is an archivist and educator at the School of Library and Information Studies at the University of the Philippines and former investigative journalist. She worked, among others, with popular content creators in the Philippines, including here, Mati Magulang. This is her nickname on TikTok. Her name is Mona Magnovelus, and she will join the presentation too. She is a social media creator and a genealogy curator, and she also had the chance to serve on the TikTok Safety Advisor Council for Asia Pacific. And together, they will talk about a project called History on Reel, which turned decades of journalism and documentary footage into accessible historical stories designed to engage younger audiences and counter misinformation. Then we will listen only to the presentation by Dr. Leslie Hernandez, who unfortunately is at the same time of this workshop. She's leading at the same time of the webinar. She's already leading a workshop, so unfortunately she cannot be here, but she shared with us a recorded video of her presentation. Dr. Hernandez is an educational program officer at the Archives of the European Union. Her research focuses has been on transcultural memory of migration between Latin America and Europe, using oral history methodologies and visual sources in school contexts across all levels of education. Her presentation today will address the best practice in the European civic education, showing how audiovisual archival sources can help younger generation engage with the complexity of the history of the European Union, its institutions, and core value. And the final presentation will be delivered by Ivan Milovanov. He's a professional development coordinator and project manager at EuroClio. He has coordinated several European Union founded projects focused on archive citizenship and history education, delivered through a range of formats, including physical, virtual, digital, hybrid, and blended approaches. He will speak about a project called Watching Videos Like a Historian. It is an Erasmus Plus initiative that provides educators with practical tools and a framework to strengthen the students' media literacy and critical thinking through the use of historical video and audiovisual sources. So I'll stop talking. I'll leave the floor to our first speaker, Natālija, please.
Thank you, Julia. I will just share my screen. I hope everyone sees it. So good afternoon. I'm honored to join you in the celebration of the International Day of Education. And today I would like to present an educational initiative developed by Latvian State Archive of Audiovisual Documents. And it focuses on the use of audiovisual archival documents in history education and media literacy. This project is currently being implemented in the high schools across Latvia, and it has attracted a very strong interest from the teachers and the schools. To give you a clear impression of how the workshop works in the practice, I will start with a short video from one of our first pilot sessions. Sorry, something happened. It stopped in the middle. I will share again. So the idea of this workshop did not come only from the theory. It grew out of our everyday work in the archive, because we regularly receive school groups and we talk with students about our work, and we show them our original archival documents. And we see that they are genuinely interested in historical photographs and films, but in most cases they experience these documents as something self-explanatory. And they rarely ask who created them, what was the purpose, and under what conditions these documents were created. At the same time, we live in a media environment where images are constantly reused, reframed, and manipulated, and where historical documents often circulate without their context. For us, this created a very clear task. We wanted to combine these two roles of the archive, not only as a place that preserves authentic documents, but also as a place that explains how these documents are created, what messages they communicate, and how they shape public perception. We choose propaganda as a central theme of the workshop because a large part of documents that are preserved in our archive were created under occupational regimes and served ideological purposes. And today, especially in the context of the current geopolitical situation in Europe, many of these documents are once again appearing in the public media space in different forms. Sometimes they are used as supposed evidence of a good life under occupation, taken completely out of their historical context. But sometimes they are technically altered using artificial intelligence tools to construct new narratives. But in both cases, they continue to function as instruments of propaganda and manipulation of public opinion. That is why we wanted to create a program for students focused on practical work with audiovisual documents to help them recognize how historical documents are taken out of context, reframed, and misused in contemporary media. In practice, this takes the form of a workshop based on group work, historical source analysis, and guided discussion. The workshop is structured as a guided research process. Students work directly with original archival documents and develop their interpretation step by step. The work begins with a close analysis of photographs, film documents, and sound documents, with attention to visual details, framing, and narrative focus. In the next stage, we introduce digital tools based on artificial intelligence. One of these tools is RoboFlow. Before the workshop, we archivists trained the model to recognize specific visual symbols in historical documents. And during the session, students run this model on their own computers on a selected collection of the documents prepared by us. And one particularly illustrative example comes from photographs of mass events from the occupation period. And in these images, propaganda symbols such as, for example, swastikas, are clearly visible on flags, on building facades, and in different places in the urban area. And we can see them with the naked eye, but we usually do not reflect on them by their number. But when the same images are analyzed with RoboFlow, the results can be quite striking. In some cases, the tool detects more than 50 such symbols in a single photograph. And this immediately changes the perspective and makes the scale of symbolic presence in the urban space much more apparent. For the sound documents, for example, we use speech-to-text tools to create transcripts of historical recordings. And based on these transcripts, we then used AI-assisted analysis to examine how often certain propaganda-related words or phrases appear, what patterns they form, and what similarities and differences can be observed between different occupation periods. We can also see how the intensity of certain expressions changes after specific historical events and how the language of propaganda changes over time. This part of the work is especially important because many propaganda messages are formed in a very subtle way. When we listen casually, we often do not notice them, but repeated words and phrases settle in the background of our perception and gradually begin to feel normal. After that, students compare these results with their own observations and discuss what is the difference, what this difference reveals about both human perception and computational analysis. At the end of the session, students formulate their own conclusions. They're asked to move from observation to interpretation and to explain in a structured way what the document is actually doing and how the use of technology changes the understanding of it. After this pilot workshop, we collected feedback from the students and teachers, and the results were very encouraging. Many students said that the session helped them better understand how propaganda works. Others stated that after the workshop, it became easier for them to recognize manipulation in visual media. And a large part of the students said that they would like to work more with archival documents in the future, which is quite success for us as an archivist, because traditionally in Latvia, archives form as a closed institution, and with these kind of projects, we can open up to society. And students also stated that during the workshop, they realized that something quite very important, that the basic mechanisms of propaganda, its messages, methods, and forms of representation in mass media have not really changed that much. They said that much of what we see today in our public information space corresponds very closely to the same techniques of influencing public opinion that were already being used almost 80 years ago. For us, this feedback confirms that the most important principle, preservation and education, must go together. And by working with historical documents and using them to teach skills that are necessary today, we can build a future society that is more informed, more socially responsible, and less easy to being manipulated. Looking ahead, we see three main directions for future development of our program. We want to continue to strengthen cooperation with schools and teachers. We are also working on digital version of the program to make it more accessible for a wider audience. And finally, we want to further strengthen students' ability to recognize media manipulation, not only in historical documents, but also in the contemporary media. And we see from our experience that these kind of workshops can help to achieve this goal. I hope this example from our archive was useful and interesting for you. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Natālija. Thanks very much for the video and for bringing, yes, a lot of the topics that we were mentioning on the table. I'll go straight to Julianne and Martin Magulang. So you will be co-sharing, right? So we will hear two different presentations. Please.
Good day, everyone. I'm Julie Nealega. I'm Probe's Probe Archives Head and Strategic Partnerships of Probe. Just for context for everyone, as you know, Philippines is known as the patient zero and the fake news epidemic globally. And how do we in Probe and Probe Archives cure this challenge? So in 2021, months before the 2022 elections, in the Philippines, in a survey showed that 69% of the Filipinos believe that fake news, misinformation, and disinformation are serious problems in the country. And during the pandemic as well, most, if not all, of the media or the press were also scrambling to stay afloat and survive. After all, we all need funding to sustain our operations. Despite the many challenges, Probe, the pioneer of investigative news magazine show in the Philippines, founded in 1987, believed and still believe that Filipinos, especially the younger generations, the Gen Z, need journalists and quality information sources now more than ever. And in an era where the boom of content creation is at its peak, how can a 37-plus-year-old company maintain its relevance? Thus, the beginning of Probe Archives. And as most of you will ask, why are archives important? Veteran and seasoned journalist Chache Lazaro started Probe right after the EDSA People Power Revolution in the Philippines, producing trailblazing shows mirroring the good, the bad, and the ugly side of the Philippines. The pioneering shows also echo Filipino arts, culture, and values that we believe can become a guide for the younger generation, more so on contextualizing issues and historical narratives. Probe Archives History on Reel is more than just a collection of 18,000 magnetic tapes. Probe Archives went beyond reruns or reactivating our audiovisual archives and implementing our business strategies. We wanted to reach the Gen Z through content that matters to them. We know that they can use Probe Archives, rich collection of history on Reel, to fight disinformation. And Probe entered its fact-checking era in 2021 and also became one of the signatories of International Fact-Checking Network in 2023. And using Probe Archives audiovisual collections for fact-checking in order to contextualize issues that is important with a younger generation. But if no one watches it, it's gonna be meaningless. As they say, the only constant is change. The media and the digital landscape were changing. And with this challenging fight against historical distortion and disinformation in the Philippines, we had to be strategic and effective in our campaign to fight for the truth. And from legacy or analog media, Probe transformed its effort to tap a wider audience in the digital space. Thus, the purposeful collaboration of Probe with content creators, which started in 2021 with McCoy Dubs, also known as Aunt Julie. Going beyond fact-checking of claims, Probe introduced what's the tea? It's not the tea as in the drink, but the truth. Probe collaborated with content creators in the Philippines, which is more relatable and viewed by the younger generation. With this effort since 2021, we wanted to go out of our echo chamber and usual audience. From fact-checking with McCoy Dubs, we are now in collaboration with 11 content creators, and we call them our truth defenders. Ms. Mona Magnovelus, also known as Mighty Magulang, is one of our truth defenders. She will be sharing more about these meaningful partnerships and impact of this collaboration.
Thank you so much, Julie. My name is Mona Magnovelus, and I am known online as Mighty Magulang or Mighty Parent in English. I am a genealogist and public historian. What began as a coping mechanism during the pandemic turned into translating historical and civic topics into accessible, bite-sized content that is anchored in evidence and context, all for a growing digital audience from all walks of life and levels of education. Probe is a respected media organization in the Philippines known for its documentaries for decades now. The first video we worked on was for a kid show that they produced back in 2023, and they asked me to answer the question, why do we need to love our country? So from those first conversations, it became clear that we shared the same concerns on how historical truth is increasingly challenged by misinformation, selective memory, and manipulated media. I said yes to the collaboration because they are aligned with my values as a content creator, public historian, and a Filipino. Next slide, please. We are living in a time when misinformation spreads faster than truth and when historical narratives are often reduced to sound bites stripped of context. Probe's work with audiovisual materials provides something increasingly rare, primary sources that allow people to see, hear, and assess history for themselves. This partnership was about participation in a shared mission to protect historical truth while keeping it accessible. The impact of the partnership is mostly visible in how historical conversations are happening on the ground today, online, in schools, and in communities. One example of how we are making historical conversations more accessible is the creation of video series, such as Trot or Charot, which means true or false in colloquial Tagalog. The team is intentional about how these are framed. There is pushback when creators label themselves as fact checkers because it can unintentionally create distance and sound accusatory. Instead, the approach is conversational, speaking with candor as you would with a family member at a dinner table. Another example is Check X. This series is videos addressing misinformation, taking distant or recent past and putting them in the context of current news and viral claims. The goal is not to shame or correct from a place of authority, but to walk people through the issue calmly. What is being claimed? What do records show? Why does context matter? This approach has allowed difficult conversations to happen without alienating audiences, and it keeps people engaged. We also see meaningful impact in school engagements and documentary screenings using Probe's archival materials. In one session with a local university, we met students who were deeply curious for reliable accounts on the 1986 EDSA People Power Revolution. What stood out was despite the abundance of textbooks and academic readings, many students had not experienced these historical events through primary audiovisual sources. When history is minimized, sanitized, or reduced to dates and names, it becomes easier for distortions to take hold and for the deposed to quietly return to power. By bringing archives directly to students, the partnership helps restore texture, voice, and consequence to historical events. It reminds young people that history is not abstract, it is lived, recorded, and deeply relevant to the present. Now, reflecting on this partnership, I feel it works because it respects the audience. It assumes curiosity, not ignorance. It meets viewers where they are, while quietly raising the standard for how we engage with history, media, and the truth. That to me is what is meaningful and what meaningful collaboration looks like. My name is Mona, and now it's back to you, Julie.
Juliet, audio.
If you're inspired with our project here in the Philippines, please do email us at probearchives@probe.ph and check out Probe's work with Mighty Magulang and the rest of our truth defenders and our social media platforms. Thank you so much.
Thanks to both of you. It was a very engaging presentation. So yeah, I'm sure we're gonna have questions later. And so now we're gonna have the video shared by Dr. Hernandez. Yes. Yeah. Here it is.
Hello everybody. I'm really glad to participate in this webinar because it's really focused on my work of education and research, different projects that combined visual materials, artistical materials, as well as archival sources hosted here at the Historical Archives of the European Union. I'm Nancy Hernández Nova. I'm a contemporary historian, but as you can imagine, when we need to rebuild an historical event, we need to reach the information, the right information, different levels and layers of memories that allows us to narrate in the best way that event that we are working on it. I would like to start by saying that as a premises that my current work is based in creating best practices in European civic education programs here at the Historical Archives of the European Union, with the principal aim of using the archival sources with educational purposes. And I would like to start with a simple question that I think is a thread that holds all the topics I would like to treat in my very brief intervention. I'm here at the Historical Archives of the European Union in our Alcedi de Gasperi seminar rooms. This is a very special table because we host here in this space formal, official visits as well as students from all ages. That really means all ages and generations that we can consider from 3 years old until PhD researchers, which is the specific community we are involved and we represent. What is history? This is the first question I put in my head when I was wondering on this presentation, and it's important to decide a position in the universe of history as a contemporary historian, I think, and as a teacher, as a researcher, as an archivist, and as an expert of education. I now to collocate and to focus in the timeline of the history, the timeline that is inside the huge timeline of the history, global history. So first of all, the universe of historical events is necessary to pick a point, and this is our point now, the European universe, the European integration history. So how we can represent visually, because this is our aim. And I will share to you an example of didactical panel we use to represent the Ventotens manifest. This image of the the ball of wool could be also history. Indeed, we have mainly, we can say, two different perspectives of the history. The timeline, which is a line and a sequence of events, but I can indeed pick one point to another point and then create a new narrative. When we are here at the archives, the layers of the history, and of course all these points I can pick, are more complex, and I will show you in which way. How to integrate the critical thinking in our young generations and visitors. Here you have a visual didactical panel tool that we normally use with students. And before I was referring to the linearity of the timeline of the history, because in this panel you have all layers: official memory from the European integrations, both institutions as well as individuals. This is the first page of the Ventotens manifest, and here you have the person, the intellectuals, Italian intellectuals that participate in drafting this document, but you have as well visual materials from the archives, as well as the oral history we collected from the Ventotens island. As you can see, the complex of vision of history to share a critical thinking is necessary to have all these layers of memory, even also artifacts from the families and from the archives. Being European today, or maybe being European in the future, is a question difficult to respond without tools, without a background. And indeed, the young generations try to express themselves by using a creative language For instance, you can see here textual ideas, but also visual ideas. And I would like to read as well one of these thoughts. For instance, one of the students wrote during the visit, being European for me is to be part of a bigger community with a shared history and future. It means working together for a better tomorrow. But we can also see that a visual representation of a person who was traveling around different countries in the European Union can represent their own vision as a photograph, in this case, by using Euro, the Mocha coffee machine, and this is Barcelona, in the, and this is Cologne monument, and this is a Peruvian textile. So this is a kind of visualization on what means to young people to be European today. Now we are in a very special place. These are the archival repositories, and here is a table that hosts the dialogue between archivists and students in every workshop. To say some words about a more inclusive and diverse historical narratives in terms of link between individuals and European Union institutions, we have different visual objects here on the table, and I would like to explain to you how our students who are participating in our workshops, they bring normally a family object. In this case, you have a grandparents photograph who brought Chiara Buccieri from a secondary school in Florence, and you can see it, the human and bodily language, because they are touching it together. And in this, another source from the archives, which comes from the European Invest Bank, from a project in Luxembourg, you really can see immediately the people inside the picture, because the machine in this case was the focus or the main important object to took it into account. Then we can also think about how younger generations can give the idea of continuity or maybe rupture between the individual citizenship, the national citizenship, that distinction that creates every time with the European one. And this is a drawing, a village with connected roofs and 6 flags flying together from a united Europe, and it's part of the movement, European movement archival collection in a concourse of drawings organized by the Europress Junior. As you can see, in the recent one, from the 2019, this is also a house, the house of the European Union, and it's doing by writing all the names of the countries. What does it mean to be European today? This tension between national and European citizenship, as in the Maastricht Treaty, in the 9th article, say that the European citizenship doesn't substitute the national one. I think these pictures, these drawings, these materials can help us to understand. Thank you for your attention.
Hi. So yeah, we will thank Dr. Hernandez for her presentation, showing like a variety of actual archival material. So now, last presentation before our questions. Please, Ivan, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Please give me a second or two until I can share my screen. There we go. I do believe you see it, right? Please let me know if that's not correct. So yeah, my presentation is about a project that EuroClio led with 3 other partners. For those who don't know, we are the European Association for History Teaching, so that's kind of a cover name. We do much more, but we do manage a lot of educational projects, especially if it has to do with citizenship education and history education. And there was a need that arose several years ago, and we realized that a lot of videos are circulating. Obviously, the new generation is very media-centered. Teachers realize the potential of teaching with videos, especially historical sources, but also movies that depict history. But there was very little guidance around. That has obviously changed in the meantime, and our project is hopefully a part of that solution. And from the tagline here, you can see that I think some of the presenters before mentioned that thinking historically is quite a complex thing, and I will dive into that a bit as we go. So yeah, I do have to mention that it was co-funded by the European Union. Julia also said that it was an Erasmus Plus project. And here you can see our partners. So it was the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision, Centrum Cifrove from Poland, and the Catalan TV. So basically what we wanted to achieve was to provide teachers with a toolkit that can help them work with audiovisual materials. That means everything from guidance. We assumed a tabula rasa approach. So if a teacher might have not had experience with that before, but also understood that some of them might be experienced. So besides guidelines, there are teaching strategies and collected source collections on Europeana, which for those who might not yet know is basically a project that leads the effort of digitizing Europe's cultural heritage. So here you can see the competence framework that we developed for the toolkit. This is very important because if we wanted to assess the impact of whatever we do, we needed a reference point on how to measure success in students. And I will show you in the next slide how it looks like, but basically it is structured around 4 dimensions. You can see them on the top, and then on 3 levels, right? So it's maybe a bit difficult when you see it for the first time, but it does make sense once you read it. So starting from knowledge and understanding, so that's just basically the basic understanding of what audiovisual sources are, then to skills of finding them, the right ones, using them for presentations, even creating them. Then we come to the attitudes, which is the main part that we wanted to target, so to change the attitudes towards audiovisual sources and other type of audiovisual media, so that it's not just a passive observation without critical analysis, but that they actually, as some of the presenters previously mentioned, work with the material and maybe look up the multi-perspective evidence that is behind it. So multi-perspective is very important when we talk about thinking historically. And finally, there are the values, which are obviously much harder to change, but when working with audiovisual materials, this is nevertheless included in the framework because that might be the goal of some educational efforts, and although difficult, not impossible. And then on the side to the left, you can see the levels in which these factors can be worked with. This is part of the toolkit for the Watching Videos Like a Historian project, which was one of the main outputs that we created that does aim at teachers. And as you saw on the previous slides, the secondary target group are their students, so primary and secondary learners. And basically, the goal of this is to make sure that when learners consume this incredible amount of media, they understand what that does to them, especially in the algorithm-driven world. Our first presenter mentioned a very high level of manipulation of videos nowadays, and this is just going to increase in the future. And also conversely, if they watch some kind of representation of the past, be it maybe propaganda, maybe a historical movie that might sacrifice accuracy for dramatic engagement and so on, the student just need to have a way of understanding how these mechanisms work when somebody is preparing a video for them, right? And that is not an easy task necessarily for the teacher. So that's why we have the toolkit. You can also follow the video, the QR code to download it. And for that, as I mentioned, we developed the galleries, the strategies, e-learning activities also on our platform Historiana, which uses various historical sources to aid teachers with their teaching. And as I also mentioned, we developed various practical classroom guidance, anything from, navigating this informational disorder. I think Julia mentioned disinformation, misinformation, malinformation even, and anything to actually using the software. So for teachers and students, how to create videos, stepping into the shoes of producers or directors and so on. And whenever we create some type of education material, we first look at what we want to achieve. So it was not, we knew that we wanted to work with videos, but we had to know what the educational impact of doing so would be. And here you can see a couple of reasons of why that we found very important and how this toolkit can help. And that would be it in a nutshell. You can follow the project which has been concluded at this time, but you can see the toolkit and various resources. There is a toolkit update coming soon, hopefully this year. So you can follow the project and download it there. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to any questions you might have.
Hi, thank you all for your presentation. So, well, I had some questions after hearing directly your presentation. I'll try to fine tune also to be sure I have time to answer the questions that we have so far from our audience. And there is I think there are two good questions that would allow all of you to speak and to answer interesting part of your presentation, because it's not just data, let's say, of your project that one can find online. It's more like your opinion, your experience, your perspective. And I think this is the cool thing of following the webinar, especially online, in that you have the chance to ask this kind of things. So yeah, I might start actually from one of the QA, and then I'll see if I have time to guide the rest of the presentation, because you answered already something. One thing, it was interesting for me, it was regarding the hard question. It's quite practical. How do you finance your project? It's very practical, and I don't know if the question is hard or easy to answer. Maybe it's going to be a short answer, but I don't know, maybe for some of you it could be interesting, even if it doesn't go on into the details, just a little bit, maybe also how important is, they say that this work is labor expensive. Maybe not all of this project are. Some can build on capacities and resources that we already have in your institutions, some not. So would you mind, I don't know if you all want to answer, or not all of you. I don't know, Natālija, do you want to start?
Yes, definitely I can start. I have to say that we didn't have any additional funding for our project. It was done all on our resources. For the IA tools, we used the free versions from the GitHub, so it's accessible for everyone. I advise everyone to explore this beautiful website like GitHub. I'm sure you will find many useful tools. For coding, we used Google Colab free version, which was quite accessible for our project, and it could handle this code quite well. And as we are organizing these workshops in the premises of the school, so we don't need to worry about any technical issues. So from our side, it was in terms of finances quite cheap. I can say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the part I was wondering, I don't know if it's part of this.
Yeah.
So you were using free tools, but the part of like feeding the model with the images and tagging, all this part was done all by you?
Yeah, me and my colleagues.
You were yes. I mean, you were
yeah.
the team. I mean, wow, that's a huge. It's a big one.
Yes, we actually invested a lot of time in preparing these workshops and training these models. But I think it was very good experience for all of us because we gained many technical knowledge that we can use in our work on a daily basis, and the common understanding of AI as itself and how we can use it in working with audiovisual documents, because we believe that AI is not the most important part in this. It's only as a helper for us, and it showed us many also different areas where it can be helpful for. So it was a good experience also for us.
Okay. In fact, like, I don't know if you, I think we have time. Can I ask you a little bit more about the part on AI that was like somehow the special part of your presentation? Did you draw up, like, can you give us like an idea, reflect on the comparison on like working on feeding, also on creating the model? I'm sure you get more technical, but also a general better understanding of the solution. Do you have like comparing this analysis, like the AI, how much it gave and how much it requested in terms of work and in the result?
Well, in my work, I never thought about AI as something that could replace professional knowledge or interpretation. For me, the real question is always how to use these tools without losing the document itself and without losing responsibility for interpretation. And I learned very quickly in my professional experience that technology is very good at doing certain types of work, but completely useless for others. And it can show structures, repetitions, proportions, and many statistical data, but it has no understanding of history, no sense of context, and no idea why something exists and what does it means. And this is why, in my experience, AI is useful only when it is clearly placed in a secondary role, and it can support the work. It can challenge our first impressions, and sometimes it can force us to notice something that we couldn't otherwise overlook. But it cannot decide what the document is, what does it does, why does it matter. So one of the most important things working in this project with these AI tools is that it makes the human expertise more visible, not less. So we can use the limit, we can see very clearly the limits of the AI, but we can appreciate more and more our knowledge and our critical thinking on how the human expertise is more precise than AI will ever be. So it was something very important for us to realize, because in the nowadays, when we hear AI, we have very high expectations, but in practice, especially in working with audiovisual documents, it have to be narrowed for specific tasks. But when we thought about how we can make this project interesting for younger generations, the AI was one of the first answers that we had in our mind. And when we presented, when we had this first pilot session, the students were quite intrigued by this approach, because in the Latvia, it was the first this kind of workshop that ever happened. So we are pioneers here for now. But these expectations very quickly downsized as they realized the limitations of this AI. And I think that was the main gain from this workshop, that they realized that their own knowledge, their own critical thinking is the most important thing that they can work on. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think I'll use this question on funding also to ask you more things. So Julian and Mona, I'll do two separate questions, but I see like where your areas can when you want to jump in among you, feel free. So I will start a little bit with this question about the funding also of your project for both of you. I had the feeling that for Probe Archives, it was also kind of a chance maybe to reuse the material they had to find maybe also a new commercial space for this material. I don't know. I'm just assuming from the presentation. So maybe I'm wrong. So I was interested to know a little bit what we can know about this aspect from both of you, and in general. I mean, you're both coming from the place where information is either created or content is manipulated somehow, but in the sense that it is crafted, okay, for and tailored for a specific audience. And you work with stakeholders that are on the other side, so information creator, news outlets, and digital platforms and social media. So I was very curious to know what was your experience also with them, like, and how do they? So we spoke about our archives. We were trying to we see that there is this kind of a responsibility in the management of what we are caring for, of the in our force of custodians. What is happening in this other platform? Do they have any idea of like they understand the responsibility? Do you see that they have a genuine attention for this?
So here in the
Julian.
global south, the fight against disinformation is really different in the global north. So as what Mighty Magulang or Miss Mona said, we have to handheld our audience, especially the Gen Z, because in the Philippines, the content creators, or as they also call it here, influencers, are very, they have highest views online. So with that gravitas and also Mighty Magulang's um, background in content creation and reliable information, I think it has to go hand in hand, because at the end of the day, our archives are primary sources. But if our audience, especially the younger generation, whose attention span is um, really low, how can we manage that, right? And through the partnership with content creators in the Philippines, especially with Mighty Magulang, which is, very it has a lot of credibility in this space. The audience was able to, I think, perceive it or accept it more, because journalists somehow has a lot of trust issues here in the Philippines. So with the content creators like Mighty Magulang helping us with a partnership, it has really been helpful with us. I think Mighty Magulang Miss Mona can also share the comment sections and also the impact of this project.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie. Well, in my case, I think what I am trying to do with my work is to make sure that there is collaboration that ensures archives are not just preserved, but it has to be activated. Everybody has a role. Yes, content creators bring that message out there, but archivists provide context, educators shape the learning, librarians ensure access, the technologists build the tools that lower barriers to use. I think it's very important that these groups work together so that students can gain meaningful guided access to materials that might otherwise remain unseen or misunderstood. I also want to make them researchers themselves. So it should never be just believing a talking head on your phone. It has to be an engaged process where students in the Philippines, for example, must know where and how to get the information they need. I think that is part of the whole approach that Probe has also taken.
Thank you. I don't know if there is anything you want to share, you want to share that is relevant, but I was curious, for instance, like your experience with TikTok. I mean, directly. I mean, also with Safety Advisor Council. So it makes me feel like there was an interest somehow also from the platform to hear voices on this part. You had to jump, like, let's say that it came from up, it came from down, you met in the middle. I would like to know a little bit more on this side, if you can share
I
something.
think the platform at some point realized that they were being associated with misinformation and disinformation. They were also tagged as a place where information is not secure. So what they did all over the world, not just in Southeast Asia and Asia, is they created safety advisory councils where we they engage content creators, professionals. We're talking academics, government agencies, those who are experts in safety, in child protection, all of those fields. We come together and we advise the platform on how to improve and develop their community guidelines. I think I have seen in TikTok a very sincere approach in trying to get on the same page across all parts of the world on how to protect the users of the platform. And I think that is a great first step, knowing how to make sure that those information that harm or are untrue are taken down, and that standards are set across. One example is, for example, in AI, they have a self declaration if your content is AI generated, but there is also an automated way for an algorithm for the platform to know if something has been manipulated. I think they are working with experts in Europe to make sure that that is rolled out quickly and effectively on new content that is being developed every day. And they do get so much more content every day. So I think this is a changing landscape. I think we are in a very exciting time where digital history is being made here. The What we create on social media and what we create on online today will form the archives of the future. So I think it's very important that we stay truthful and we stay genuine in terms of what we create.
Thanks for your answer. Your last words actually made me think about then the hard job that future audiovisual, photographic and audiovisual archivists will have because of all these new records that have been created and that are on social media, on platform. I suppose a lot of this might be lost in the meantime. But yes, I find it very interesting to speak with like creators that have like this background and this idea that like conscience, let's say that they are creating something that is going to be a piece of information. So thanks. And I also wanted to mention, I think it's the fact that we have the attention rate of the public is very short. Is not definitely not just a problem in the Philippines. I think maybe the Philippines is a much younger population than I can say in Europe, in other countries. I'm based in the Gulf, so it's different. We have so many different nationalities there, so you might feel it more. But I think it's something that it's very common. It's a problem. I mean, it's a fact that we have to see everywhere. And I also think that, like in this case, like maybe archives or like projects like the one Natālija spoke about, or the one that also Dr. Hernández spoke about, and maybe also for you, Ivan, are like projects that where like you don't have to catch students somehow in the meantime where they're just, I don't know, looking at scrolling down. I mean, it's a moment that is dedicated. Their teachers like they're taking them there, so you have the chance, you have the space in that moment to go maybe a little bit more deeper. Not to say that that one is not accurate, but like speak, go to direct source. I mean, like take your time and speak about maybe in a different language as well. Okay, so I'll go to Ivan. I wanted to drop a little bit the question about the funding, which in your case, I think it's. I mean, it's you mentioned already in your presentation, so it's part of the initiatives of the European Union. But I also wanted to know. So in that case, you show that like for your in the project that you're talking about, like it's clear that you have to evaluate the impact and the outcomes of this student learning. You're talking about this. So I wanted to know what indicators or methods of the one you mentioned also were most effective, and also like how much this was also, I suppose, linked, if it is linked to the part of funding or not necessarily, because I mean there are. I mean, it's good to have some programs that are talking to different audiences. And I mean, it's not only about outcomes all the time that you can measure the impact. I mean, maybe it takes time and it's not everything is always measurable. But yeah, I wanted to know a little bit more about this part that we have more and more to do when we do projects, right? To check our impact and measure.
Yes, certainly. I'll do my best to answer. I do want to add, when you say initiative of the European Union, I mean, it is funded by the European Union, but to apply for this project, this has to come from the citizens or NGOs or governmental organizations, even businesses. This was a limited Erasmus Plus project. It was, I think, the deadline was middle of June 2000, middle of the year 2021, so probably June, July. And it was called the Partnership for Cooperation in the Field of Youth. And it was very interesting because it united, the goal was to unite various sectors. That's why we have a NGO, us, that work with history educators. We had the Catalan TV, we had the video archive in the Netherlands, we had a youth organization from Poland. We also had a supporting partner in web development. So the point was to work for the youth, but cross borders and cross sectors, and that's why this project was designed the way it was. But it was initialized by the partnership, basically. And to try to answer the other question about the indicators and how we measure them, so this was not necessarily the requirement of the project. This is something that we do. We think that's just necessary if we want to create good educational materials and content and events. And for this case, we really wanted to see if we can develop historical thinking. So anything from source criticism, multi-perspectivity that I mentioned, putting things in context. Then obviously media literacy, that was the big one. And that's a big challenge. So how to analyze bias, for example, to see what the intent behind the message was, how to deconstruct the message, who's the intended audience? Is it me? Is it someone else? How this influences me? And then obviously the role of the observer or the student in this case in this whole landscape. So what is your civic awareness, your ethical awareness, your ideas about this whole thing when you are exposed to certain media and when you propagate it, when you just click the share button, right? And that's why we developed the framework that I mentioned, which makes it easier to measure. So we work directly with teachers, not so much with students. So there we assessed their knowledge before and after. And some of the partners also did a 6 months. After 6 months, they did another analysis. But basically, how you can measure this in the classroom, you have various indicators like cognitive indicators, obviously. So it's about, if you remember, the information that you get from the framework and the skills that you get. So how you can work with these files, what is your ability to contextualize them, how can you use sources, various sources of the same event or person, how you can criticize that, how can you determine the origin, purpose, the things I mentioned, like the audience, and so on. And then obviously there are more hands-on effective methods of measurement. You can see how they performed on a task before, how they perform on a task after. You can create assessments like a test. You can give them work, so they can create a video, they can create a presentation about a selection of sources, and so on and so on. You can assess that, obviously. And just also when you have open discussions in the classroom or group work, you can see how the dynamics might change before and after you do such exercises, especially through time, because the way we approached this, at least, is our goal was not to achieve these goals once you have done your educational activities in the classroom. The goal was to keep increasing these skills. That's why we have that competence of media literacy, because the more you work with your students, the more you can see the change, or at least that's the idea, right? So yeah, basically, the point is not necessarily to develop a working educational content as much as it is to be able to, as you say, demonstrably assess if there is a change in students' skill sets and especially attitudes, because that's what changes. If you have skills and don't really care about those skills, there is a very limited practicality to it. But if they actually start caring about the critical aspects of consuming media, then you have achieved something.
Thanks. I wanted to ask something more, like actually both maybe more related to you and Natalia's project. So how do teachers, I suppose that in every case, teachers are the activators, so the one that you get in touch with first. Do they contact you, or you go in and like you target some like levels of education, some specific country, in the case of Ivan, of the project, some in all countries, like how, who contacts who, like in the targets that you have, the visits that you have at the archive, like you advertise what you do, or yeah, or they know about you by different sources. Even you want to start, we were already talking, and then I go
Sure.
through with Natalia.
Yes, thank you. Well, it was a bit different during the project and now post-project, right? So during the project, we worked with a lot of experts that could actually contribute to the toolkit and other outputs that we made. And they came from all of these countries and also broader. So we had experts from countries that were not part of the project partnership. And it was mostly a network-based dissemination. So we reached out to the networks of these people, indeed. But we did also have journal entries. We still have some now, obviously social media while the project was active. And now we do mostly mention it when it is relevant. My participation in this webinar is also part of that effort.
One of them.
Yeah.
Okay. And you found like, so you see like were more from some countries or others, more from some levels of education, or it was quite, the answer, let's say, to the project was more or less the same? You saw some differences?
Well, the differences, I mean, especially in the educational context and in Europe, it's very difficult to please every educational system. We'd really tried to make it as neutral and yet as ready to be used as possible, but that's a huge challenge. Now, obviously, the problem is there are so many different resources for teachers, And then, first of all, they have to be aware of it. And then once they're aware of it, it does have to grab their attention enough so that they look into it. And then it's a matter of time. And we really tried to make it as ready-made as you want it to be. You can spend time with it as a teacher, or you can just literally grab it and go to the classroom tomorrow after reading it once and do it. And that being said, we worked in the European context. There was a lot of interest here, but we did see some downloads from the USA. And a bit from China, although that is never known whether that's bot work or actually they do care, but I'm certain that there are at least some. But for us, we always focus on the countries that we work with in the given project, because that's also how these projects work.
Okay. Natālija, what about your experience?
Well, at the beginning, when we developed this program, it was fully our initiative. It was experiment, and we managed to establish cooperation with one of the historians, who is also a teacher in a high school. So this program is more aimed on high school students who have already chosen to study more humanities. And I have to say that in Latvia, the circle of historians is quite small, and we all know each other more or less, and we are quite friendly community, so it's easy to communicate and to arrange some things. And after this first pilot session, which was truly an experiment, we redesigned this program based on the comments of the students and the teacher. And then we published an open call on our archives website. And also we distribute this information to our regional archives who have more closer cooperation with the local schools, because it's important for us not to organize these programs in big cities of Latvia, but also in the country regions. And it's mostly aimed for the high school students who already know that they want to study later humanities, because it's easier to work with them. They have already some level of knowledge than comparing with those who have chose to study more different disciplines. So yeah.
Thanks. Let me see what. Maybe I wanted to ask something. Maybe final question. Let's see how it goes. So Julian and Mona, in your so the day of education this year, the theme was the power of youth in co-creating education. So I wanted to know, like, maybe you have even too much interaction. I don't know, maybe you have even too many feedbacks. But I wanted to know, how did your audiences respond to your project? I mean, you can see in terms of followers or visualization or so, but did you also have like some feedback from what you were sharing? Because I think you were trying to trigger somehow them as well. And if their feedbacks were also like, they helped you, they reshaped something that you were doing, or no, maybe there were too many, but they still like were part of the fulfilling part of your work. So yeah, so you had so many, a big youth in the Philippines, so I'm sure maybe you had more of this interaction.
Mm-mm. So I think I can start it with since we began in 2021, the following of Probe was really an older generation. So those are the ones who are grew up in the 90s and 2000 and watched Probe. So with our partnership with the content creators, our audience really became the Gen Z. So it means that the impact of our campaign with Miss Mona and other content creators were working effectively. It wasn't just with the number of viewers, but also their messages to us that, do you have other source of information on this topic? So they were really engaging. And at the end of the day, it wasn't just an online effort, because our content creators, as what Miss Mona said, we're doing school tours. So it's really both offline and online. It's not just, okay, grabbing their attention online, but also trying to engage and connect with them offline. Because I think somehow the younger generation has a bad image to us older
Reputation, right? Yeah.
sometimes we say that, oh, they don't care. But according to a study, if we only make them interested in a certain cause, they will try to find a good source or longer source of information. And I think if you will check out Miss Mona's content online, apart from the ones with Probe, these are 5 minute long, and it still gains a lot of traction, millions of views. And maybe Miss Mona can also share about more of that with the impact side.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Julie. But I think you're right. The channel that we use, short form video, is a good way to catch information or to catch interest for the information. But there has to be a next step, and that is what is also part of what we're trying to do. I think beyond the instant gratification of seeing something that you are that appeal to you, I think we have to inspire two more types of, I guess, practices, if you could call it. And what the first one is learning from primary sources. That's one thing that I advocate for as a content creator, as a genealogist. It is important that we don't just rely on what our mother's friend told us, but there has to be like programs, like documentary screenings, archive-led talks, and platforms that utilize and contextualize original footage so that the kids can understand what it means to assess evidence firsthand. And the second thing I advocate for, and this is counterintuitive for anyone on social media, is I advocate for slow reflective consumption. So encouraging people to pause, to verify, and discuss before sharing content. I think whether this is through guided classroom discussions or community watch sessions, these help counter the speed driven nature of misinformation. And these two practices, I feel, cultivate two more things that is very important in the digital space, and that is critical thinking and shared responsibility. And Probe Media and myself and all of the content creators that are in their stable, I think we are all on the same page when it comes to promoting those two things: critical thinking and shared responsibility.
Thank you. So now we're perfect. Wrapping up. So thank you all for your presentation. I think we started, and when we see this problem, the problem with the misinformation, disinformation, as a global one. And it is, but then I also felt that, we can see that somehow there are peculiarities in the type of either issues that a community is facing or the reality of that community. It can be a demographic difference, a geopolitical difference of different countries and different situations. So I feel that and that's particularly good that we share this practice, because sometimes first I feel that we feel that oh no, we have this big issue, our reality, our communities, and you see that actually it's definitely not yours only, and that you can see how again different communities, different institutions, different countries. I think we spoke about nationalities somehow a lot. This thing came into it also, depending on the way you're tailoring your course design. So particularly good that the International Council of Archives keeps putting all of us in contact to see how we practically work in our communities. So thank you. I hope you had a chance to listen to something interesting, that you're going home with a bite of information that can be useful and relevant for you. The recording, the webinar is registered and it's going to be shared. Thank you very much and have a lovely afternoon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.